more now. I'm joined on the set by Henri Landes, a U.S. analyst and professor at the elite Sciences Po University here in Paris. Henri, thank you so much for coming in. You're also the author of a book you wrote in French, which can be translated into Hello, Houston, the U.S. as seen by an angry American. Can you relate to what we just saw there a few moments ago?
Yeah, Americans are angry. They are disappointed that they have elected somebody who has very misogynistic, very xenophobic, very racist comments during the campaign, behavior as well. They are upset and worried about what kind of policies he's going to implement. Is he going to respect all Americans and be the president of all Americans like he says? Let's look at the first speech that he gave when he won. He said, now it's time to bind the wounds. And my message to him, and message I think of a lot of Americans to him, is you don't need to hurt the U.S. population that much during a campaign. Obviously, it was your political strategy, but we don't need to talk about people that way to have important and effective policies put into place. We don't need to say we're going to stigmatize a whole population and declare war against a religion. That's too simplifying of a fact. We didn't have a real debate, a political debate, in a world where politics is already very stigmatized and people are sick of it. So that's one of the reasons why they're upset and protesting, as they should be.
You talk about binding the wounds. What do you think about the choices Donald Trump has made so far in his cabinet, particularly the nomination of Stephen Bannon, the former head of the alt-right website Breitbart?
Well, for many, he is somewhat of a voice of racism in the transition team and in the White House. It is very worrisome for a lot of civil rights activists, for a lot of defenders of minority rights. It is probably not very positive. It's not a very positive signal in terms of the advancement of the LGBT community, of equality between women and men, for different minority rights. It is probably something that we are going to have to fight against. For those that want to see a relatively progressive platform for the next 4 years and build on the progress that we've made. Having a lot of people come out of poverty, having a lot of people be able to be on the radar and benefit from healthcare, benefit from being integrated in society. These are things that could be deconstructed if we don't have thinking that applies to all of Americans' well-being. That's what's important here. And so we don't want some fringe-minded thinking person to come in and give too much advice to the president. And we definitely hope that he's going to be the president of all Americans, and we will protest if he doesn't.
Let's talk a bit more about that protesting, because this cultural phenomenon of protesting is very French. We see it a lot here in Paris. We don't see it so much in the United States. Do you think these protests will continue, or will they just peter out as we all get used to President Trump?
It depends on what he does. I don't think they will discontinue if he starts implementing policies such as going backwards, full speed on the environment, if he decides to be really a climate skeptic and completely ignore what we should be doing and transitioning out of fossil fuels and moving to renewable energies. If he does that, I think we'll see more protests. If he decides to come backwards on the rights of women and their right to choose and the right to control their bodies and their destiny, I think we will see more protests. I think we will see more protests if he comes back on these, because this is an unprecedented election. This is an election where really somebody just put forward straightforward, misogynistic, xenophobic, and racist proposals and speech. And so we should see protests. The Americans, yes, they protest a little bit less than France. There was a strong movement against unions starting in the 1980s with Ronald Reagan, and we saw that for the next 35 years. You can see basically a downward spiral of participation in unions in the private sector. That has something to do with it. But let's not forget that there was a very strong civil rights movement in the United States. There was a very strong environmental movement in the 60s and 70s as well. And I think it's about time that if we all of a sudden put forward some retrograde policies because of the Trump administration, I think it's about time we see another civil rights movement, basically on public health, social equality, and on environmental protection.
All right, thank you so much for that, Henri Landes, for coming in and taking the time to speak to us here on Inside the Americas. Well, 1 week